So thanks everybody for coming. Does that sound good or not? It's okay. So I hope everybody can see, and I don't really know what severe oculoplastic reconstruction is, so we're going to talk about like eyelashes. So what could be more exciting? You know, you might be wondering what you're doing here on this sunny Saturday. The sun has gone away, it's cloudy, it's starting to snow and sleet, so you don't have to feel bad about being here today. Okay, so this is kind of a funny topic, like who cares about eyelashes and what could go wrong with your eyelashes and why do you have eyelashes and all that. So I just thought I would talk about misdirected eyelashes. So, you know, like a lot of our body, we take a lot of things for granted. We take our eyelashes for granted, and when you do what I do, like you kind of wonder why people even have eyelashes because there's so much trouble in my clinic. So the condition that is called trichiasis means a condition related to eyelashes, very general term, and it means basically you're getting poked in the eye with your eyelashes. Now, probably everybody here has seen a patient that's had some problem like that. I'm going to introduce you to a patient that some of you know. Her name is Phoenix, and she has a really bad and misdirected eyelashes problem from a condition called Stevens-Johnson syndrome here, and that is a type of scarring of the eyelid that turns the eyelid inward, and she has extreme eye irritation, sensitivity to light. She can't even open her eyes really. Severe scarring and dryness from this autoimmune condition. I'll tell you a little bit about some eyelid anatomy. We'll go over some kind of problems that we see. There's like a lot of problems, so it's not meant to be, you don't have, there's no test, you don't have to memorize these problems. And then we'll go over some treatment. So this is Phoenix, and I can show her because she's a celebrity. She's been on national news and all that, and some of you know her. You can see she has severe skin scarring, and she's suffers from a condition called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is an autoimmune condition where you lose the skin on your face. All your skin sloughs off, and the tissues in your mouth, and sometimes in your GI tract as well. And so we'll talk more about that, but this is how patients with Stevens-Johnson look in the severe phase of their disease. Now, not everybody is this bad, but this is kind of how Phoenix looks. Okay, so we talked that trichiasis means a condition related to eyelashes, and you can imagine having eyelashes poking your eyes, and everybody's here has had some kind of eyelash in their eye at one time. In its kind of mild phases, it can cause irritation with fluorescein staining, as you see here. It can cause severe corneal epithelial breakdown with a lot of staining. It can cause later changes related to scar tissue and calcium buildup on the cornea. This is a patient that has misdirected eyelashes. You can see her kind of rubbing, and also if you look closely, you see the corneal transplant that resulted from the corneal ulcer that the patient got from the eyelashes poking the eye and eventually causing a severe infection. So it could be trivial, but it could be very severe. So when I was a resident long ago, we used to just say, okay, you have an eyelash poking, and we would pull it out. If it was really bad, we would take a freezing gun and we freeze the lashes, and all the lashes would die. We didn't really think much about there being different causes, but now we recognize there's lots and lots of reasons why people have lashes that are poking your eye, and most of those are related to a scarring of the back of the eyelid. So we'll talk about that. So we should start at the beginning. So like, what are eyelashes? So eyelashes are like the regular hairs on your skin. They're mainly protein, like 95+% keratin. Keratin's the same thing in your fingernail. So eyelashes have color just like your body has color. As we get older, we lose the pigment in our skin. We tan less easily. We get gray hair. We get gray eyebrows and gray eyelashes. So it's pigment coloring protein, and the rest is mainly water. Each eyelash has a root that's embedded in the edge of the eyelid between what you'll see is the tarsal plate and the skin in the orbicularis muscle that closes the eye. And importantly, each hair on your body, including eyelashes, have an oil gland associated. So that oil gland is part of the lubrication system of our eye. and the lubrication of our skin. As we get older, we get dry skin, we get dry eyes. Part of that is because the oil glands associated with our eyelashes and the rest of our lubrication system in our eye kind of poop out, and we get dry skin and dry eyes. So in your upper eyelid, hey, Dr. Rar, you're not leaving, are you? Oh. Okay, so, what? Oh, yeah. Okay. Likely story. So you have about 2 or 3 times as many eyelashes in your upper lid. I'll go down here and talk to see if anybody's awake over here. The Lawrenceburg people are awake. 200 or 300 eyelashes in your upper lid and only about 100 in your lower lid. And kind of interestingly, the lashes somehow know to be longer in the center and shorter on the side, so they're kind of tapered as they go out. Exactly how we know that, I don't know. So the longest eyelash on record, and it's in the internet, so it must be true, is 2.75 inches, and it was a man, not a woman. So the average length of our eyelash is less than ½ an inch, about 10 millimeters or 0.4 tenths of an inch. And they grow a tiny bit every day. Okay, who has eyelashes? Well, every mammal has eyelashes. You know, mammals are hair-bearing animals that bear their children alive. And so these are all mammals that have eyelashes. Elephant, really long, straggly eyelashes. Giraffe with really thick eyelashes. Goats. So camels in particular are known for really long eyelashes, and maybe to keep the sand out of their eyes. That's possible. And giraffe have really super thick eyelashes, thought to be because if you ever seen giraffe in the wild, they're foraging through the trees and they're poking their head in the trees to get the leaves, and a lot of those trees have thorns, so it's thought that it helps to avoid the thorns. But those are really kind of guesses. But we think largely that we have eyelashes, or all mammals have eyelashes, for some sort of protection. So to avoid foreign bodies hitting our eye, or to help with lubrication, and not just foreign bodies, but it turns out partly just to direct the air current across our eyes so we don't dry our eyes. So let's talk a little bit about making tears and making lubricating your eyes. So Phoenix, the girl that I showed you, she has really dry eyes because the scar tissue has damaged the eyelid, the oil and water producing parts of the eye. So when you make tears, the tears are made in the upper outer corner, kind of up in here. Blinking pushes them across the eye, and then they go down in the nose to drain. So when you cry, your nose gets stuffy because the tears are going down your nose. So if you have a watery eye, either you're making too many tears, maybe because eyelash is poking, or the eyelid isn't blinking right. So when we look at somebody with the watery eye, we're saying you have poor pumping, or we call the lacrimal pump, to pump the tears down, or is your tear duct drain blocked? So you kind of look at the opposite. If you have dry eye, what part of that is wrong? Are you not making enough tears? Are you not blinking the tears properly? So eyelid problems and lack of tears can give you irritated eyes. Turns out the tear lake, or our tears, have 3 layers. They have a mucus layer, a water layer, and an oil layer. So to help the tears stick to your eye, you make a mucus layer that bonds the water to your eye. So there's a thin little mucus layer that is made by the conjunctival goblet cells that holds the water on the eye. The water would evaporate quickly if it wasn't covered by an oil layer. So your body makes an oil layer, just like every hair in your body that has an oil gland associated with it. On the edge of your eyelid, you have oil glands that secrete oil that cover the water so the water doesn't evaporate. So like when you're out in the wind, or if you buy a ceiling fan or the defroster in your car, if you make poor oil, your eye tends to the tears tend to evaporate and you get dry, irritated eyes. So all 3 of those layers are important to lubricate your eye. And associated with, again, with every hair in your body, including the eyelashes, is this little oil gland. So part of what the eyelashes do, and the meibomian glands in the tarsal plate, is that they provide that oil layer that lubricates the eye, keeps the water layer from evaporating. So three layers of tears: a mucus layer, water layer, and then an oil layer. And in particular, the oil layer comes from the little glands associated with the hairs, your eyelashes, and this big, long gland that is called a meibomian gland. And everybody knows about meibomian glands. Everybody probably has been aware of their own meibomian gland at one time when they get a sty of some kind. And so the little sty on the edge of your eyelid is related to this little oil gland right here in your eyelash. And the big chalazion, or redness, that you see is related to the meibomian gland in the flesh of the eyelid, this thing. So we all have had some kind of sty at some point in our life, but that's important in terms of lubrication. So when you think about a patient like Phoenix that has the scarring, their eyelid doesn't blink very well, so they don't lubricate the eye by blinking, but they also don't make tears very well because those oil glands and the water glands and the mucus glands are damaged by the disease. Not only that, then the lashes are poking their eyes. So when we see a patient that has an irritated eye, sometimes we'll pluck the lashes, but their eye doesn't get more comfortable because they don't have good lubrication, because the process that's turned the lashes inward has also damaged the lubrication. So partly, we look at patients in terms of all those features of lubrication to understand why their eye might be irritated. This was an interesting paper that came out last year, and using a sort of fancy, kind of crazy experiment on 22 species of mammals in a wind tunnel, they showed that the eyelash length was, the perfect eyelash length was 1/3 of the width of your eye. So our width of our eyes are about 30 millimeters and our eyelashes are 10 millimeters. So before you start making your eyelashes long, keep in mind that you should have eyelashes 1/3 the length of your eyes. Otherwise, your eyes dry out more or you clear less debris from your eyes. So if you have short eyelashes, turns out your eyes dry out more or you get more dust and grit in your eyes. So there are some particular animals that are birds that are supposed to have long eyelashes. But remember, birds aren't mammals, so birds are not hair-bearing organisms. This particular bird of prey in India has particularly long eyelashes, you can see. But they're actually not eyelashes, they're feathers. So birds don't have eyelashes because they don't have hairs. But those feathers may serve some of the same purposes in redirecting the air current when birds fly to keep their eyes from drying out. Another bird in particular is an African bird of prey called the secretary bird that has particularly extravagant lashes, but those again aren't hairs, those are feathers. So this is a little bit off track, but since it's a nice day and we want to learn something interesting. Birds don't usually blink, actually. Birds have a third eyelid, just like maybe your dog does, and that nictitating membrane is the third eyelid. And so when you see a bird look like they're blinking, actually that third eyelid, a translucent membrane, is flicking across the eye to make it look like it's closed. Because really, only few species of birds actually close their eyes in the normal way that we do. And most birds, when they blink, the lower lid goes up rather than the upper lid going down. Now, it's interesting that translucent nictitating membrane was there probably like when birds fly, especially hawks and falcons when they're flying fast or they're crashing down on their prey on the ground, going over 200 miles an hour, that nictitating membrane may actually keep their eyes from drying out so they can see that little mouse on the prairie so that they can get it so that that breeze doesn't wreck their eyes. They also have some nictitating membranes have a little hole in them. So when aquatic birds swim underwater, they can see easily through that nictitating membrane while they're swimming underwater. So that seems kind of crazy to have a nictitating membrane. One of our dogs had had bloody tears, and we took her to the vet. The vet said probably has a piece of dirt in the eye, but I don't think so. And so the bloody tears continued, and the dog ended up having a tumor. Our golden had a tumor of her nictitating membrane. And so we took her to the vet, and the vet said, well, we can take that out. And I was like, well, maybe you can. And so I said, well, can I watch? And she said, no, we don't allow people to watch. And I said, well, it's kind of like what I do. It's like tumors around your eye. And she said, well, okay, we can let you watch. And I said, well, maybe I can help. And she said, no, you can't help. And I said, well, it's the textbook that I wrote on tumors around your eye. She said, okay, well, maybe you can help. And so then when we're doing surgery, she was fumbling along. And I said, well, maybe I can do the surgery. So I took the tumor out of the dog's eye, and she lived for 2 more years and died of something else. And I could do no wrong with my wife for about 2 weeks after that. She loves the dog more than me. Okay, so it turns out we all have a nictitating membrane. We all have that third eyelid, a vestigial of the third eyelid. And if you look at the person next to you, that little fold called the plica, that's what's left of our nictitating membrane. So we had a nictitating membrane several generations, many, many generations ago. All right, so it turns out that most birds don't blink, except for owls, and a few other species tend to blink. So you may have seen an owl blink, but that owl actually may not be blinking. Owls are one of the species of animals and many other birds that can actually sleep with one eye closed. So they have a form of sleep that allows them to kind of survey the area in case there's some animal that comes around. They can see that they can keep one eye open, but they're actually sleeping. It doesn't have anything to do with misdirected eyelashes, but I thought it may be that your eyelashes are part of expression. Certainly your eyes are part of expression, and we know your eyebrows are part of expression. So if you have curved, high eyebrows, you look happy. If you have eyebrows that point in, you look like you're scowling and mean. If you have eyebrows that are droopy on the side, you look tired or sad. So Botox is the thing that we use to get rid of those 11 lines and make people look happy. So you can just make somebody's whole expression change by changing the shape of their eyebrows. And this is a lady that we did eyelid ptosis surgery and eyebrow surgery, and she's gone from a tired, sad grandmother to a happy with it grandmother just by changing mainly the shape of her eyebrows. So it's possible that, part of your eyelashes are there to show, to be attractive, to attract mates, and that's probably partly why ladies in particular, I guess it's not a binary world anymore, but lengthen their eyelashes to look more attractive and do different things to shape their eyes by changing the way the eye makeup goes. It turns out that in Egyptian graves over 4,000 years ago, they found eyelash curling tools to sort of enhance your beauty. And you remember all the pictures of Cleopatra and all with big chunks of mascara on the eyelid. And Egyptian ladies also put atropine in their eye. And the other name for atropine is belladonna. And belladonna, what does that mean? Like Madonna means my mother. So belladonna means pretty mother or pretty lady. And so Egyptian ladies would put a form of atropine in their eye to dilate their pupils so they would look prettier, because it was thought to be big, round pupils look pretty. Okay, so a couple more little fun things before we get more serious. So it turns out that mascara was invented in around 1830 by a guy in France named Rimmel, but it didn't get popular in the US until the 1900s. There was a chemist named P.L. Williams who invented the first practical application of mascara. So in case you run out of your mascara, you can mix a little coal dust and Vaseline together and apply it to your eyelashes to have the first practical mascara. Now, I know this again true because I read it on the internet, that turns out T.L. had a sister named Mabel, and she was in love with this guy named Chet. But Chet sort of had eyes for another woman. So T.L. said to Mabel, you should try some of this coal dust and Vaseline on your eyes and go wink at Chet a little bit. And she did that, and Chet kind of fell in love with Mabel again, and they ended up getting married a year later. That was the start of the company Maybelline. So Mabel and Vaseline, and supposedly that's the origin of Maybelline eye makeup. Might not be true, but it sounds good. So everybody wants longer eyelashes. Well, not everybody, but a lot of ladies want longer eyelashes. And so you know about false eyelashes, of course, and extensions. So in the Face and Eye Center, eyelash extensions are available. Judy, one of the estheticians, she'll work with you to glue on individual eyelashes to the root of each of your own eyelashes so that you have long, luxurious eyelashes, even if you don't have, you have to have some eyelashes to glue on the extensions, but she tediously glues one lash on top of each other lash until you have beautiful eyelashes. She does a really good job. So how else could you make your eyelashes grow longer? You probably know where I'm going, but the eyelashes have 3 phases: a growth phase, a stable phase, and then where they kind of die. The active growth phase is called the anagen phase, and it lasts about 100 days. So like the rest of the hairs in our body, a few hairs are falling out all the time. So if you can lengthen the growth phase to be longer, then your lashes will be longer, and you'll have more lashes because less of them are falling out. So who knows what Zalatan, latanoprost are, right? Everybody knows that your glaucoma patients have long eyelashes because these medicines increase the growth phase of your eyelashes. So the company that makes latanoprost said, hey, more people would be interested in long eyelashes than taking glaucoma drops. So why don't we market as Latisse? So you know that Latisse is a medicine that you can apply on your eyelashes, and it makes your eyelashes grow, and it really makes them grow, just like a glaucoma patient. And this is a picture from Allergan that markets Latisse, and you can see it's a big part of Latisse and Botox and other cosmetic things that we do in Face and Eye are like billion-dollar businesses across the country. So this is, I don't think you'll recognize this person, but if I tell you, you'll recognize, this is Megan Ring before and after her Latisse type product. She's actually not using Latisse, but you can see how long and luxurious her lashes are, like scary long. And so that's one way to make your eyelashes longer. Just as an aside, in Face and Eye, they just started offering microblading, which is not really related to misdirected eyelashes, except that it's kind of an interesting thing. So microblading are a different way to tattoo your eyebrows that is semi-permanent, meaning it lasts for a long time, but it's not permanent. And it's done with a very superficial nick in the skin, and then pigment is applied, and it's applied in a way that you can shape the eyebrows and put little lines so it looks, more like real eyelashes than just a chunk of smear of black pigment. Okay, so it's not all fun and games with eyelashes though, and so a lot of our patients have blepharitis, and blepharitis is associated with that scale on the edge of the lid, and also dryness. So now you understand why their eyes are irritated and dry, because those oil glands are not working well to help prevent the loss of the tears, the evaporation of the tears. So a lot of blepharitis just comes from age and our oil glands wearing out, but there are these little nasty creatures that can live in your eyelashes, particular types of mites called demodex that grow into the oil glands of your eyelashes. And in particular, they give this little core of tissue that's sort of coming out where it's diagnostic of what's called demodex. That's the mite of the bacteria that grows in your eyelashes. And this is the little demodex guy, and it can also occur in the skin and cause those similar breakouts in the oil glands of your skin. All right, so now we'll get a little less fun, more medical. So if you look at the eyelid itself, it should rest against the eyeball and have pretty much square corners with the eyelashes directed outward. The eyelashes are stuck in the muscle part of the eyelid. There's a flat part of the eyelid called the tarsal plate. That's the flat part that you put eyeshadow on that gives you the shape of your eyelid. So we talk about a front and back layer of the eyelid, or lamella, like posterior lamella, that is the tarsal plate that has this big meibomian gland, that oil gland that prevents evaporation, and then the skin and muscle that move and close your eye. The skin and muscle at the edge of the eyelid are fused together, so that when you look up, that part of the eyelid always is right on your eyeball, oriented correctly. If you look down, that eyelid is oriented correctly, so the lashes are always in exactly the same spot relative to the eyelid. Anything that disturbs that relationship, that block of tissue, might allow the skin or the eyelashes to rotate against the eyeball. So here's a patient that has scarring of the back of their lid, and you can see how dry the eye is because of poor lubrication. And that posterior lamella, that back layer that has the meibomian glands in, is not only not working and making oil, but it's turned inward, and it rotates the lashes against the eye. So that's one of the serious causes of misdirected eyelashes, or when that back layer of the eyelid gets shortened. And that's partly what happened with Phoenix with her severe Stevens-Johnson syndrome. You can see that these eyelids are actually kind of curved, where that flat, square edge of the eyelid is not sitting on the eye. Instead of the eyelid being always oriented correctly when the eye moves, the lashes are grinding against the eyeball. Okay, and what this patient has? Eyelash ptosis, very good. So why is that important? So those eyelashes are not pointed out, so that tissue on the front of the eyelid is saggy. It's not scarred and pulled inward because the back of the lid is tight. It's that front layer is saggy. So that patient has loose tissue on their eyelid. So when I walk in the room and that patient has a red eye, I know exactly what they have before I even ask them a question. And they have floppy eyelid syndrome. So if you look, this eyelid, the lashes are not pointed downward. This eyeball, the lashes are pointed downward and the eye is red. So that tissue on the front of the eyelid is not a block of tissue. It's loose tissue that's floppy. And when that patient, when you pull the lid up, the lid goes way up off the eye, and you see how red and irritated it is. It's thought that those patients, perhaps when they sleep, they rub their eye or their eyelid may actually evert while they sleep. So one of the treatments for that is to put a patch over their eye at night so that their eyelid doesn't evert, and often they'll be more comfortable. In lieu, if we can confirm the diagnosis, we'll take a piece of the eyelid out, and it'll pull the eyelid close against the eye, and it'll correct the red eye that they have. So when we see a patient with lash ptosis, we think floppy eyelid syndrome. What are the other questions we might ask them? Yeah? Sleep apnea, exactly. So we ask, do you snore? And they say, well, I do snore. And then you say, does anybody tell you when you snore, you stop breathing? Like, okay, and that same floppy tissue on the eyelid is in the throat, and so when you breathe, that collapses and your airway clogs up or blocks, obstructs, and so we see patients with loose eyelids. We diagnose floppy eyelid syndrome and say, we can fix your eyelid, but the important thing is for you to see if you have sleep apnea. You go to a sleep clinic. They measure your sleeping during the night and see how many times you stop breathing. My sister, I was at Christmas with my family, and my sister was snoring away on the couch, and about every 3 seconds she would stop breathing. And I said, I think you might have sleep apnea. And she went to the sleep clinic, and they allow something like 8 times, I forget if it's an hour or something, you might have a hesitation in your breathing, and she had 130. So, so it's pretty common. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So let's talk a little bit about reasons why eyelids turn inward and cause the lashes, because it's not all just an eyelash problem. Often it's the eyelid itself. If the eyelid is loose, as you get older, your tissues get loose. It gets kind of floppy. If the eyelid gets really loose, it'll fall off the eye and cause ectropia. If the eyelid gets loose and one of the muscles inside the eyelid gets loose, the eyelid will tend to turn in, called entropia. So as you get older, the tissues get lax and the eyelid gets loose. As the eyelid gets loose, sometimes it'll flop out, ectropia, and sometimes it'll pull in, it'll roll in, called entropia. I started to say pull in, but it's not really pull in. It gets pushed in by this tissue pushing the lid in. That's opposed to the other patients that we've talked about that have had scarring, where the eyelashes actually get pulled in. So one is a looseness problem. The tissues are loose and the eyelid kind of wobbles on the eyeball. The other is the tissue in the back layer of the eyelid is tight and actually pulls the eyelashes against your eye. So there's different treatments. Okay, so these are patients with ectropion. The eyelid turns out. Horizontal lid laxity, left to right looseness is the main culprit, so we tighten the eyelid. Turns out a lot of animals, particularly horses and dogs, have eyelid problems. And you know, certain breeds are associated with certain problems. So this is a beagle that has ectropion, and then there are many dogs that have entropion, and horses also have a lot of entropion. And this is a horse, you might have seen in our waiting room, with after suture repair of the entropion. Okay, so that demonstrates the laxity that you have, and you should have less than 5 millimeters to pull your lid away from your eye, and when you let go, the eyelid should snap back. This is a patient that has facial nerve palsy, so no muscle tightness of the lid, so it's the extreme version of looseness. It's not just looseness to age, it's looseness because there's no nerve function tightening the muscle. Now, in contrast to these patients, this is a scarring kind of thing. So the scar is causing the eyelid to pull outward, so that's a cicatricial, cicatrix is a scar, so cicatricial ectropy. So there's tightness on the skin, in this case from a burn, or on the left, on the left lower lid case where the patient had fallen and had scar tissue when his lid healed. So those are both cicatricial ectropy and not involutional or not loose tissue. This is an example of the eyelashes turning in, same kind of irritation, maybe not as much dryness, because really the problem is not the back layer where the oil glands are, but the looseness of the lid. It's a looseness cause of involutional entropion. And again, those muscles are loose on the lower lid. So when we fix the lid, we fix the tightness of the lid so it snugs up against the eyeball, and we tighten this muscle so the eyelid doesn't roll inward. This is a lady with involutional entropion. So the eyelid is loose and it rolls inward. And you can see she has a piece of Scotch tape pulling her eyelid down, so her eyelid, when she blinks, it won't roll inward. So it can be quite irritating. That's in contrast to these patients that have the pulling of the eyelashes inward, or that cicatricial entropion. And you can see that the upper and lower lid are turned inward, and when you flip the lid, you see scar tissue on the back of the lid. So again, we're talking about the cases like Phoenix has, where the back layer of the eyelid is scarred, and it pulls the eyelashes inward, as opposed to cases where the eyelid is loose and it kind of gets saggy, it flops in or out. So when we look at the slit lamp, when somebody has misdirected eyelashes, you see a really red eye. We look at that edge of the eyelid to see if the eyelid is square or rounded. If it loses its square shape, we know that the back layer of the eyelid is pulling it inward, and the tears are starting to move up onto the skin part. We can look at the junction between the wet and dry part of the eyelid. We call that the mucocutaneous junction. This line should be behind or posterior to the eyelashes. If the eyelid is rolled in a long time, then that mucocutaneous junction will go forward. So if you look at this picture, it's a little hard to see, but if you follow this line, it's going closer and closer to the eyelashes until all the way, the wet part of the eyelid is now where the lashes are. That means those lashes are in the tears or rubbing on the eye. So a way to diagnose that. Turns out there's many more conditions related to misdirected eyelashes. Kids can be born with an extra roll of skin that pushes their eyelashes upward. That's called epiblepharon. The little epi means, on top of the eyelid. And that roll of skin pushes the eyelid inward. It's like an epicanthal fold in an Asian eyelid. Canthus means corner, so epi is the fold on the corner of the eyelid. And you can see the lashes swishing on the eyeball there. This might be over your head, Dr. Lehman, so I can start over if you want.
Please.
I can start over if you want.
I think everybody would like to hear it again.
Okay, go ahead. All right, we'll go back. So kids have such good oil and water production, they can have a bunch of lashes rubbing their eye, and they're generally not too irritated. Whereas we get older, our lubrication isn't enough to protect our eye from those lashes. So sometimes a kid can have 20 lashes rubbing on their eye, and they'll be comfortable, and they won't even have any corneal staining. One thing, lashes like this are much more friendly than short lashes that you plucked out 2 or 3 weeks ago, because when those lashes grow back, they're little bristles, and they're not soft paintbrush lashes swishing across your eye. They're pokey little lashes. So if you pluck a lash, remember it's going to grow back, and it might be worse when you grow back until it gets long enough to swish across the eye. There are some patients that are not Asian that have this. You see he has a little epicanthal fold on his upper lid, and you can see that there's this epiblepharon, and the lashes are pushed upward. If it stays as the child's face matures, we just cut out a little strip of skin and then sew it back together, and the lashes don't point the wrong way. This is one of my favorite misdirected eyelash things called dysdichiasis. It sounds like dysfunctional, D-Y-S, but it's a dys, D-I-S, which means two, and it means distikos is a Greek term meaning 2 rows. And so these patients with really luxurious eyelashes, they actually have an extra row, 2 rows of eyelashes originating from those meibomian glands. How is that possible? Well, remember we said every hair in your body has an oil gland associated with it. As we've evolved over millennia, that big little meibomian gland that was a sebaceous gland got bigger and bigger and bigger to produce more oil to lubricate our eye. At the same time, that lash got smaller and smaller and smaller, so all we're left of is a meibomian gland that secretes oil. So that pylo, meaning hair, sebaceous tissue has become only sebaceous. It's lost its pylo part. Except in these cases where somehow things got mixed up, and that big old fat sebaceous gland that's supposed to lubricate your eye also still grew a hair. So these patients have a whole extra row of hairs coming out of their meibomian glands. So you can see the little ducts where your meibomian glands are supposed to secrete. And you can see these, they're not usually luxurious in big fat lashes, but you can see the lashes growing right out of the pores. Kind of an interesting thing, really pretty rare, but is kind of interesting, like that nictitating membrane being part of our ancient ancestors. This is a primitive vestigial way that our bodies form. In those cases, we split the eyelid in 2 layers and we take that freezing gun, because eyelashes cold will destroy the eyelashes and not the skin. We can freeze the back layer of the eyelid, sew it back together, and then most of the lashes on the lower, most of the normal lashes are preserved, and the lashes that came out of the meibomian glands are gone. You can see the little scar where we separated the eyelids. That's a good question.
What's the question?
The question was, do the meibomian glands work properly after that? And so there's a question. It's a good question, and if you want to do a research project, we can do it. Because I don't think we know the answer, but probably those meibomian glands didn't work quite normally anyway, because they were pilosebaceous glands, so that they weren't as good a sebaceous producer anyway. But I don't know of any clinical studies that show that. There is a way to photograph meibomian glands, and a lot of the patients, I think, that we treat for dry eye with hot soaks and all that to stimulate their meibomian glands, they probably don't have meibomian glands at that point. So it's a good question. There is a way to look at the meibomian glands with an infrared camera that I wrote some papers on. But it doesn't get reimbursed, so nobody does it. So I mean, and it's not of much clinical value, but that's a very good question. So that we talked about epiblepharon, dysdichiasis, entropion. There is a condition. You can have misdirected lashes from trauma. So like this girl was in an auto accident, and you see the lashes, instead of being like an extra row or the skin pushing out, the lashes are just willy-nilly pointed all different directions because the trauma just disrupted the orientation of the lash roots. And in those patients, you really have to cut out the abnormal part because you can't redirect the lashes. So in a patient like this that has a lid notch from the trauma, we would cut out the abnormal tissue and then sew it back together so they would have a normal lid margin and the lashes would look normal and be directed appropriately. So we talked about freezing. You can do freezing, which we hardly ever do. And then we talked a little bit about the laxity cause of eyelashes turning in, or entropion. So we said epiblepharon, the skin that pushes the lid in a child, dysdichiasis, 2 rows of lashes, misdirected eyelashes, and then involutional changes with loose eyelids, and then this cicatricial kind of scarring thing. So that's the involutional, the loose eyelid where the muscle is too loose here. To fix that, we do a surgery where we tighten that muscle in the lower lid. So that's that loose muscle. We're putting stitches on the edge of the tarsal plate. These are the causes that we talked about. And I just want to focus on that last thing, the scarring, and then we'll get back to little Phoenix. So this is another patient with Stevens-Johnson. It's not as bad as Phoenix was. Sorry. You can see that the lashes are, the lid is curled and the lashes are turned inward, and the eye has a lot of discharge. So partly it's a lash problem, partly it's a lubrication problem. The most common cause of patients that have misdirected lashes, so if you see a patient that has lashes that turn inward and they don't have trauma and they're an adult, they weren't born with it, like the epiblepharon or dystichiasis, and their lid isn't loose, it's probably subtle scarring on the edge of the eyelid that just pulls the lashes in a little bit, but it's so subtle, people think it's an eyelash problem, not really an eyelid problem, but really is an eyelid problem that we call marginal entropy. And that's where we look at that rounded edge of the eyelid. You see the slit beam is curved instead of square, and that tiny shortening on the back of the lid is rolled those lashes inward. The edge of the eyelid no longer has that square shape, it's just kind of more rounded. So you can see patients like that. So that's the most common thing you see, and again, that mucocutaneous junction where the wet meets the dry part of the eyelid move forward. Sometimes it can be, a cause can be identified like surgeries or chalazion that's been there or been worked on several times. More commonly, we don't know why. Okay, so to fix it, if the problem with these cicatricial cases is shortening, the way to fix it is to lengthen it. So there's two ways to lengthen the back of an eyelid. One is to cut the scar bands that hold the eyelid like this. So we make a little cut across the back of the eyelid, and then we use sutures to bend the eyelid out. So we say we fracture the eyelid and we bend it outward, and we use sutures to hold it in that position. So we've done a cut, we use sutures and rotate the eyelash outward. Those stitches dissolve over 6 weeks, and then the eyelid, if we're lucky, scars in the right position. So here's a patient with eyelid. You can't see the edge of the eyelid, it's rolled, lashes are rubbed against the eye. With the eyelid, there's scar tissue in the back. So we cut that scar tissue, we put those stitches in, and then the eyelid is back to where it was. And hopefully it scars now outward instead of scarring inward. So let's see if this will work. This is, by the way, much harder than a retina surgery. So
I'm just a hairy back left drag.
there you go.
I wasn't smart enough.
So this is a little cutting needle that is cutting the scar band. You see the tissue on the back of the lid expanding. We're rolling the lashes outward, and then we just take a little suture. You can see how bad that cornea is really scarred up. And we take that little suture to pass through the lid so that when that heals, the lid is everted a little bit, that tarsal fracture procedure. That works really well if the scarring is mild, like what we call that marginal entropy. Just the margin is turned inward. It doesn't work very well if the scarring is really severe and that lid is shortened, because you can't turn it out enough, and when you create a scar, it's just going to turn back inward again. So patients that have really severe scarring, we do a more extensive procedure where we lengthen the eyelid. We do the same cut, but just like we would in a patient that has cicatricial scarring of the front of the lid, the skin is too short, we put a skin graft. In patients that have scarring of the back of the lid where the mucous membrane is too tight, we put mucous membrane in. So this is sources of skin for skin grafts. You can see here's a skin graft being replaced. Obviously, a small part of this problem. Patients like this that have severe scarring, we have to cut the scar and then replace it with mucous membrane. So what are the causes that happen like this? This is a patient, most of these patients I share with Dr. Holland, who's world famous for screwed up eyes like this. And so this is a guy, Roman candle injury, so he's like, oh look, it didn't go up. Oh, yes it did. Okay, so blew up in his face. We can do, Dr. Holland can do corneal transplants, but he can't do brain transplants, so unfortunately. A lot of chemical burns. So
The world's going to have one less retinal surgeon. This guy would grow up to be a retinal surgeon.
Yeah. Well, still got one eye, so he's fine. So you can see the scar tissue from a chemical burn. This is a guy I saw on Thursday in the clinic from Tennessee. He is at work, some chemical splashed his eye. You can see his cornea is white. The curve of his upper lid is turned in, and you can see all the scar tissue. He's got a tube shunt in the upper picture caused severe glaucoma. His cornea is clouded, and when you flip his lid, you can see the back of the lid is destroyed, and that's causing the lid to turn in, as well as ruin all that lubrication that we talked about. The two world's most common causes of blindness are infection from trachoma that causes a shortening of the back of the lid, or vitamin A deficiency. So we rarely see trachoma here, but it causes so much scarring that these are actually the meibomian glands opening way on the back of the lid. The lid is so shortened it's pulling the lid inside out. The other thing that we see a lot of at CEI is ocular cicatricial pemphigoid, which is an autoimmune disease where the tissues become inflamed for not for infection, just like rheumatoid arthritis. It gets inflamed for no good reason, and the inflammation causes scarring that pulls the lashes inward. These patients can be mild, but they can be really, really severe, and they basically go blind. This is an example of a different type of autoimmune process. You can see she has no eyes, basically. Her eyes are so scarred, the conjunctiva has turned to skin. This is a patient that had an eye removed for retinoblastoma and then got severe radiation treatment. And that radiation, as it kills the tumor, it can kill the tissue on the back of the eye and cause the lids to turn in. So let's look back at Phoenix. So when Phoenix came to see us, she's from, I don't remember, Tennessee or Alabama. But she basically, these people really come to see Dr. Holland, not me. At least that's what Dr. Holland says. I think they come to see me for their eyelids. But they really come to see Dr. Holland because he does stem cell transplants, considered world expert on stem cell transplants. Stem cells are those pluripotential cells, meaning they can do whatever they want to do. They can take bad tissue and turn it into good tissue. So she came to us to have stem cell transplants where they took stem cell tissue from her mother and sewed it into her eyes so that she could regrow normal conjunctiva and corneal epithelium so that she could open her eyes. But before they do that, they have to have working eyelids, because if their eyelids are rubbing against their eye, the cornea, the stem cell won't work, and the subsequent corneal transplant won't work. So every morning I wake up and I say, what can I do today to make Dr. Holland look good and be famous? And so we work on their eyelids. So Steven Johnson is a rare disease. I've probably seen 50 or 100 cases, but that's in a long time. It occurs on the skin and mucous membranes. It's not known really why it happens. It's often triggered by an infection of like just a flu-type syndrome, and then goes on to the kids get a red rash. The red rash turns into blisters on their mouth and skin, and not all their skin starts to slough off. It is associated with certain anticonvulsant medicines, like for seizures, but even medicines like Tylenol or simple antibiotics can trigger it. So this is our different patient. You can see all the skin is sloughed off. And it's obviously a serious thing. It's treated like a total body burn because their fluid balance is off and they get cellulitis. They can become septic and die. They can have respiratory and GI involvement. The death rate is in excess of 25% in many studies. Their eye problems are what we see, and like we said before, I wanted to lead up to this, that it's not just an eyelash problem in these kids, or in patients that have inturned lashes. That scar tissue that pulls the lid inward causes poor lubrication, and that poor lubrication is part of the problem. So when Phoenix came in, she couldn't really open her eyes. She had a baseball cap on, sunglasses, and she was so sensitive to light, she was functionally blind. Her cornea is scarred as well, different patient. Okay, so we kind of talked about it. So to treat that, we have to cut that scar tissue and put a piece of mucosa in. And that's what we did with Phoenix. So this is that pemphigoid kind of patient. I'm sorry, trachoma patient. We cut the scar tissue and we put the graft in. You can use the mucosa from the mouth. You can use mucosa, usually use it from the mouth, either in the front of the lip or the side of the lip, and sew it in. So this is harvesting a piece of tissue from the side of the mouth and then put it eye to make the appointment. I think we'll skip this, just a video on the same thing. Let me show you a little bit about Phoenix, because we only have a couple minutes left. All right, so some of you may have seen this. So Liz Bonas is, oh wait, we do have the video, sorry.
We're listening to the staff with more of the breakthrough treatment that may help restore her son's live.
Hey guys, good evening to you. She just turned 9 years old, but this little girl has a really big fighting spirit. After 40 days in the hospital, initially in Alabama, she is now on the road to recovery, thanks to a team of specialists at the Cincinnati Eye Institute who hope to help her see the world in the way her family is praying she'll see it again.
We have tissue
It
available.
was just a few months ago when little Phoenix took this smiling, healthy girl to someone her family says they barely recognize. As her condition deteriorated, her family said they stayed by her side, and they began what has now become a worldwide campaign. They prayed for Phoenix.
We stayed up and prayed all night long. We really went and grabbed heaven and touched heaven and said, we don't want her to go. Heaven's a wonderful place, but that's not where she needs to be right now.
Eventually, Phoenix was diagnosed with what's called the Stevens-Johnson syndrome.
It's a fairly rare disorder that starts with a red rash, develops blisters, affect area of the skin or venous membranes like in your eye or your mouth, and then that skin slips off.
Dr. JeffreyNeradMD says that could cause a serious scarring to her skin and her eyelids. Clearly for Phoenix, however, it has now scarred her spirit.
So what's happened since you have people praying for you?
A lot of stuff. One of the things, however, her family is still praying for is better vision.
I can see like there's they just can't be too far away.
So this
The
is after
scarring,
her
however,
surgery
has
for
turned
eyelids.
Phoenix's eyelids in toward her eyes. It's also destroyed her tears. So Dr. NeradMD is one of just a handful of surgeons in the country who just used tissue from Phoenix's cheek.
To reposition the eyelid so that eyelashes don't create more scarring on the cornea.
Soon they will head for the next step in this journey, but until then, they have a special request from all of us. As you might imagine, they're looking for a few more people to be part of that prayer for Phoenix prayer meeting. That's because Phoenix is being considered for a stem cell transplant. Users donate cells from family members.
And that will repopulate where new cells will grow across the eye and help to lubricate the eyes.
More than anything, though, her family wants those prayers for Phoenix to stay strong.
In a time where we didn't really know what to do, what to think, what to say, her life has spoken so much.
Her dad, who is also the music minister at her church, says her favorite song,
I've got joy, joy, joy in my soul.
not surprising, since she clearly brings that to the fall everywhere she goes. I just love that.
So it's a little hard to see on that, but that was her follow-up after we did the venous memory grafts before Dr. Allen did the stem cell. When I first could see in the pictures here, she has a baseball cap on, wears sunglasses all the time. In the interview, her eyes are open, she doesn't have sunglasses on. And it's just fixing her eyelids to get her eyelashes out way, make her life way better. She could actually see, like, we walked in the room, and she was the first time she had seen me. She said, "Oh, you have a lot more hair than I thought you did." I'm getting smart. And then she said, "You're a lot older." So then the last, this is our kind of our last slide. So then we have to give Dr. Holland credit because he has spies everywhere.
Don't match for her.
So this
It'll
is
be a
at
few
St.
weeks before they
Elizabeth's.
can tell if
St.
everything is
Elizabeth's
lining
over
up
here,
for
so-
the next step in this journey. But doctors here say she's lucky to be with one of the few teams in the country that then can take this next step and actually give her a corneal transplant.
And if she can grow that skin, we then can do extensive microbial transplant, get her vision back.
Her family is once again asking all of us to continue to pray. pray for Phoenix. She needs healing so her body won't reject the stem cells.
Big bold prayers honor God, and they're not too much to ask for. And
As for what Phoenix wants all of us to know, it's pretty simple.
really to help people if they're like, oh, this is so bad, and then they can think about what I've been through, and they're like, oh my goodness, this is nothing compared to what that was.
What a brave little girl. Well said, huh? Phoenix's family traveled here from Alabama for this procedure. We will share the results. I got word late today. Everything went as planned. We'll also share the results of your prayers and the work of this amazing medical team.
So that is a tribute to all the people at CEI, all the stuff that you guys do, and you should be proud of being here and being part of the CEI team and the St. Elizabeth team and our Good Sam colleagues, because there's some really cool stuff that happens, and guys like Dr. Holland that is really considered like, if not the world expert, one of the world experts in this kind of thing. And guys like Dr. Riemann, Chris does stuff that really nobody else does in the country. So
Push a broom really well.
yeah, and he pushes the room well. So so just to summarize, I wanted to show you hopefully some interesting and fun things about eyelashes, and go from kind of some crazy stuff about critters that have eyelashes, and talk about the common things we see, and probably this is more than you ever wanted to know about eyelashes. Just to let you know a little bit what we do, and hopefully make your day a little better at work every day you come back to the CBI. So thanks very much. Questions? Yeah. The mice?
The mice.
Mites, okay. Yeah, there you can pull them out, and then there's a special soap that you use to clean eyelids. That's Dr. Hader's specialty, actually. So if you have that, send it to Dr. Hader. He's good with mites. Yeah.
How quickly from the time you take the graft in the mouth before you use it?
So you take it, the question was more or less how do you do the graft from the mouth, and how long does it take? So we do the graft, we take the tissue from the mouth, and then we sew it right in the eyelid at that time. And then we actually use a tissue glue. If you're interested, after I can show you that little video that I skipped, but we take the tissue out from either the front or the side, and then we cut the scar tissue on the back of the lid. We lay it in place, and we use Tisseal, which is a tissue glue, and we glue it in place, and then we put a plastic conformer and a contact lens in the eye to protect the eye. Put a patch on and a tarsorrhaphy, sew the eye closed so that everything has a chance to sit tight against and not move. Like laying sod, you can't lay sod on the sidewalk, has to be a good bed, and you can't move it over an inch every day or it won't grow, so you have to get good tissue to lay the mucous membrane on, and you have to hold it still with the tarsorrhaphy and the patch. And then within really a week it's pretty attached, but it takes about a month before we take the conformer out, and then it's good to go. Like that's a picture of her a month after her graft. And then maybe 6 months later she gets a stem cell, and then Dr. Holland took her back to surgery at St. Elizabeth's like a week or two after a stem cell from her mom. She has to be on immunosuppressive medicine so she doesn't reject that. And then did an EUA and she was fine. And then I'm not sure exactly when he'll do the transplant. It kind of depends. Do you guys know when he would do it? Probably 4 months, I would guess, something like that. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there risk of reoccurrence?
I suppose I would say no, except that it's considered a lifelong mild inflammation. So it won't recur like that whopping blistering thing, but there's ongoing inflammation forever. So it's one of the more difficult scarring things to take care of, because there's ongoing inflammation despite what you do to correct the scar tissue. So it continues, it doesn't recur, but it continues at a low level. Any other questions? Okay, thanks very much.